Picture a desert night 2,000 years ago. The air is cold and sharp, and the sky is so clear you can see the Milky Way with your bare eyes. A small caravan moves west along a trade road. The men on these camels are not merchants. They are priests, trained astronomers, scholars of the stars and their meanings. They have been watching the sky for months, and something in that sky has changed. Not a blinding light, not a comet with a flaming tail, something far more subtle and far more precise. These men have read a sign that almost no one else on earth could read, and it is pulling them toward a tiny, forgettable town in Judea. The town is called Bethlehem. For 2,000 years, you have heard this story told one way. A bright star appears in the sky on the night Jesus is born. 3 kings follow it like a spotlight until it stops over a manger. It is a beautiful image, and it is on every Christmas card you have ever seen. But what if almost every detail in that image is wrong? What if the star was not a star? What if the wise men were not kings? What if the sign in the heavens was not a single bright light, but a slow, silent sequence of events? Events that only a handful of specialists on Earth could decode. That is the story we are going to uncover today. And when you see what modern astronomy has found, the real story becomes far more astonishing, because it suggests that God did not override nature to announce his son. He choreographed nature years in advance, down to the exact week. Let us start where every investigation should start, with the original text. The story of the star appears in only one place in the entire Bible, the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 2. Matthew writes that wise men from the east came to Jerusalem. They ask King Herod a dangerous question. Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? Then they say something crucial. For we have seen his star in Te Anatole. Now, most English Bibles translate that phrase as in the east. But the Greek word Anatole does not mean east. It literally means a rising. When the word is singular, Anatole, it refers to the rising of a celestial object. When it is plural, Anatolon, it refers to the direction east, where the sun repeatedly rises. In verse 1, Matthew uses the plural to say the Magi came from the east. But in verse 2, he switches to the singular. We saw his star at its rising. That one word changes everything. The Magi are not saying they saw a bright light in the eastern sky. They are saying they witnessed a specific astronomical event at the moment it first appeared, a heliacal rising, the first visibility of a celestial body just before dawn. This is the language of professional astronomers, and it tells us these men knew exactly what they were looking at. So who were they? The Greek word Matthew uses is magoi. It does not mean kings. In the ancient world, Magi referred to a specific class of Zoroastrian priest scholars. They were based in Babylon and Persia. These men were not mystics gazing vaguely at the heavens. They were among the most educated astronomers on Earth. Babylon had been recording planetary movements on clay tablets for over 1,000 years. They tracked cycles of Jupiter and Saturn with stunning accuracy. They mapped the sky into houses, regions of the zodiac assigned to nations and peoples. And here is the detail that makes the whole story turn. In Babylonian astrology, the constellation Pisces was called the House of the Hebrews. Any major event happening inside Pisces was read as a sign about Israel. Jupiter was the king planet, the marker of royalty. Saturn was the shield of Israel, the planet linked to the Jewish people. Now hold those facts in your mind, because you are about to need them. What if the Magi did not follow a light? What if they followed a date, written in the motion of planets they had studied their entire lives? In the year 1604, a German astronomer named Johannes Kepler changed everything. Kepler was watching the sky when he noticed Jupiter and Saturn drawing close together. As he observed, a bright new star, a nova, suddenly appeared near the 2 planets. The sight shook him. He was a deeply religious man, and the image reminded him of the Bethlehem story. So Kepler did what Kepler always did. He calculated. He rewound the motion of the planets backward through the centuries, and he discovered that in the year 7 BC, Jupiter and Saturn had done something extraordinary. They did not simply pass each other once. They passed each other 3 times in a single year. This is called a triple conjunction. It happens when Earth, Jupiter, and Saturn align in such a way that Jupiter appears to pass Saturn. Then, because of retrograde motion, Jupiter seems to stop, reverse, and pass Saturn again. Then it reverses once more and passes Saturn a 3rd time. In 7 BC, these 3 conjunctions occurred on May 27th, October 6th, and December 1st, and all 3 happened in the same constellation, Pisces, the House of the Hebrews. Think about what the Magi would have seen. The king planet and the shield of Israel, meeting 3 times in the house of the Hebrews. In the language they had studied their whole lives, the sky was screaming one message: a new king is coming to Israel. But the sky was not finished. The following year, 6 BC, something even rarer happened. Mars moved into Pisces and joined Jupiter and Saturn. For several weeks in February, all 3 planets clustered within 10 degrees of each other. 3 planets massed together in the house of the Hebrews. Babylonian astronomers would see this once in a lifetime, if they were lucky. The next such grouping would not occur for over 2,000 years. Now let us stop here and consider what this was not. It was not a blinding light in the sky. Jupiter and Saturn, even at their closest, remained about 1 degree apart. That is roughly twice the width of a full moon. A person glancing at the sky would not have noticed anything unusual, but a trained Babylonian astronomer, he would have recognized it instantly, the way a doctor recognizes a rare symptom. This explains one of the strangest verses in the entire passage. When the Magi arrive and tell Herod about the sign, Matthew says Herod was troubled. He had to ask his own advisors where the Messiah was supposed to be born. Herod had no idea. He had seen nothing unusual in the sky, and that is precisely the point. If the star had been a dazzling beacon visible to everyone, Herod would not need strangers to tell him. The sign was real, but it required expertise to read. Only the Magi had the training to decode it. Now some scholars have proposed other explanations. Could it have been a comet? Chinese astronomers did record a broom star around 5 BC, visible for over 70 days. Some researchers have suggested this comet as the Star of Bethlehem. But there is a problem. In the ancient world, comets were omens of disaster, not blessing. They were signs of plague, famine, and the death of rulers. No trained astronomer would see a comet and think, a savior has been born. Could it have been a supernova, the explosion of a dying star? Supernovae can outshine entire galaxies and remain visible for months. But ancient cultures, especially the Chinese, recorded every supernova they witnessed. There is no record of a supernova matching the right time and location, and astronomers have found no remnant in the sky that fits. Could it have been a meteor? No, a meteor burns out in seconds, and the Magi followed their sign for months. One by one, every other theory falls short. The planetary conjunction remains the strongest scientific candidate, and the timeline aligns with something else: the historical record. The historian Josephus tells us that King Herod died shortly after a lunar eclipse visible from Jericho. Modern calculations place that eclipse on March 13th, 4 BC. Herod died roughly 2 to 3 weeks later, just before Passover. Matthew tells us Jesus was born during the reign of Herod. That means Jesus had to be born before the spring of 4 BC. A birth in late 6 or early 5 BC fits perfectly. The triple conjunction began in May of 7 BC. The planetary massing followed in early 6 BC. A journey from Babylon to Jerusalem would take 1 to 2 months. The Magi could have arrived in Bethlehem by mid-5 BC. Every piece of the timeline locks together: astronomy, history, and scripture, all pointing to the same narrow window. But there is one detail that science still cannot explain. Matthew chapter 2, verse 9. The star which they had seen at its rising went before them, till it came and stood over where the child was. A conjunction does not move ahead of travelers. A cluster of planets does not stop over a single house. Scholars have debated this verse for centuries. Some say Matthew was using the poetic language of his time. Ancient writers often described comets and planets as hanging over cities. The Roman historian Dio Cassius once wrote that a star stood over Rome. It was a common way of saying a celestial event coincided with a place. Others suggest something deeper. The astronomer Michael Molnar discovered that on April 17th, 6 BC, Jupiter experienced a special event. The moon passed directly in front of Jupiter, an event called a lunar occultation. It happened in the daytime, invisible to the naked eye, but a skilled Babylonian astronomer could calculate that it was happening. And here is the remarkable part. As seen from Jerusalem, that calculated occultation was positioned in the sky directly above Bethlehem, a planet hidden by the moon, standing over the exact town named in Micah's prophecy. You could not design a more precise sign if you tried. And here is where faith and science arrive at the same doorstep. The skeptic sees coincidence. The believer sees choreography. Because everything we have uncovered follows the laws of physics perfectly. No law was broken. No miracle of light was required. Jupiter and Saturn moved in the orbits God set for them at the foundation of the world. Retrograde motion followed the geometry it has always followed. The Magi used the knowledge they had spent decades acquiring. and every thread converged on a single town at a single moment. The prophet Micah had named Bethlehem centuries before. The book of Numbers had promised that a star would come out of Jacob. The Magi had read the sky and confirmed what the prophets had foretold. This was not chaos producing a lucky alignment. This was a universe obeying its creator, on schedule. In December of 2020, the world witnessed a great conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn. The two planets appeared so close they almost merged into one light. Astronomers called it the closest such pairing in nearly 800 years. Some newspapers called it the Christmas star. Millions of people stepped outside and looked up, many for the first time in years. And for a brief moment, the whole world was doing what the Magi did, searching the sky for meaning, wondering if the heavens are trying to say something. The answer the Magi found 2,000 years ago has not changed. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the sky above proclaims his handiwork. That is Psalm 19, verse 1. Not poetry alone, but a claim about how the universe works. The stars do not speak in words. They speak in motion, in timing, in alignments so precise, they take centuries to unfold. And if you learn their language, as the Magi did, the message is unmistakable. Before we close, here are 3 things to carry with you. First, the star was probably not a single object, but a sequence of rare planetary events over 2 years. God does not always shout. Sometimes he encodes. Second, the only people who recognized the sign were the ones who had prepared to see it. The Magi spent their lives studying, and that study led them to the Messiah. What you prepare to see, you will see. Third, science and faith are not enemies in this story. They are witnesses to the same event. The telescope and the prophecy both point to Bethlehem. Now here's a question I want you to answer in the comments. If God wrote a message in the sky that only trained eyes could read, what message might he be hiding in your life right now? What sign have you been trained to see that no one around you has noticed yet? Think about that, and thank you for watching.